hear me talking about connecting and the importance of connections. And, as we grow older, we tend to think that, we know how to make friends and we know how to keep ourselves surrounded with like-minded people so that they keep us going. I've personally found that motherhood could be very lonely sometimes, and also entrepreneurship. Shasta Nelson is just going to give us a little bit of insight on how to continue to grow the friendships that we do have. And if we don't have many and we want to make new friends, how to make those connections happen. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, I'm so happy to.
I found a quote, and I use it as my mantra, that Michelle Obama actually said, and it's in Oprah's Words That Matter book. I don't know if you've read it or heard of it. My ability to get through my day depends on the relationships that I have with other women.
Love it. Love it.
How
love it.
True is that?
Such a good one.
All these things that happen in one way or another have, to me, because you talk about, the sense of community and of belonging. To me, that's also extremely important. I can't get anything that I'm trying to get done or that I aspire to do without somebody else mingling in the process. So how important is that?
Yeah, well said. I mean, just crucial. Even before I really got on like the friendship bandwagon, as a life coach, people would hire me for divorces or for wanting to move or want to get a new job, and they didn't know what their life purpose was. And it was amazing to me, just even back then, the research was so compelling that I would ask every client, no matter what they hired me for, tell me about your friendships right now. Tell me who's in your circle, who's supporting you, what are people saying? Because it's like not only that they have resources and like contacts and connections, but they're the ones who help define what's normal. I mean, if you live in a place where being an entrepreneur is really seen as irresponsible and risky, then that will influence whether it's something you're prone to try or do. If you live in an area where everybody carries canvas bags, you're more likely to do so yourself. I mean, our values and the things we expose ourselves to, I mean, really who we are, down to like the people around us, in varying degrees. Obviously, some are much closer. If all of our friends think that you have to stay home after you have a baby, and that's just the way everybody else does it, then it is very hard to sometimes perhaps hear your own voice in a different way, if it's speaking in a different way. I mean, we are so shaped by the people around us, across the board. I mean, every relationship is impacting us.
I have a very close friend of mine. We speak to each other on a I would say on a weekly basis. She just had her baby as well, and she always tells me, I've never felt so alone. Like, my friends are going through different stages in their lives. And I know that that's something that you talked about when you did your interview in the Today Show. One friendship envy, where, one friend is getting married, the other one is having a baby, the other one is just progressing in her career. How do we, who are friends with these people, maintain those relationships?
So I have, in my book, it's the 5 circles of connectedness, and there's 5 different relationship categories that we want to like foster and make sure we have in meaningful. So they range from like the most casual to the most intimate. And somebody that your friend is like, she would be perhaps one of the more intimate people in your life because you talk regularly, and it sounds like you talk rather deeply. And so the 2 definitions for being all the way over to the most intimate side is vulnerability in more than one area of your life, and consistency, regularity with which we're engaging. So we can often get there and then find that one of us goes through a different life stage, and we feel like if you're the first to have the baby, or the only one to be at home, or like if you have that first or last or only feeling in your friendships, it's not that you want to walk away from all these intimate, meaningful friendships you've invested in, but it speaks to you that you need what I call the second category, which is common friends. So you have to find people who know what postpartum depression feels like. You need to find people who also know what it feels like to be engaged and be planning a wedding right now. Perhaps you need somebody else who also has lost a child. Perhaps you need somebody else who also is a high-level corporate female executive. And so it's that we don't want to dismiss, we don't need all of our friends to be just like us in everything. We don't want to keep walking away from friends who don't get this experience, but we need to be mindful that that we want to hang on into and continue to invest in these meaningful relationships, and they can withstand, these 3 or 4 relationships should be able to withstand any change one of us goes through. It doesn't mean it won't shift. It doesn't mean it won't become a new normal.
And it doesn't mean that we're going to stop being friends. It just seems that we're at different points in our lives, but we just have to balance each other out, and continue to connect in different ways.
Yes, but be very mindful that we also owe it to ourselves to go find those specific relationships we need. And we would be misled if we went to those relationships. Like I have a girlfriend who joined a mother's group because she craved these, interactions with other moms, and none of her friends had kids at the time. And then, but then she found herself feeling slightly resentful because the moms, all they talk about is their kids and da-da-da-da-da. And she was frustrated with them because it never felt more meaningful or more deep. And I had to say to her, that's not what you joined them for. You joined them so you had other people who knew what sore nipples felt like after this.
Yeah.
Sleep-deprived eyes who were struggling with their identity. That's why you joined that group.
Exactly.
You have your committed friends to still talk about all those other parts of you. And it doesn't mean that one of those mom friends may not move over that continuum and move closer to that, but we show up in our relationships and are at risk of having unhealthy expectations for different friends if we don't realize that they all serve different purposes.
Yeah.
I say part of parenting is modeling healthy friendship.
So you also talk about to just show up authentically in those connections. How is that really going to nurture future relationships in our lives?
Yeah, no, great question. And I have a frientimacy triangle. Frientimacy is the word I'm using for friendship intimacy, just because we're intimacy, everyone just thinks,
sex.
So frientimacy triangle. And the premise is that on one side is commitment and on the other side is vulnerability. And that you have to move up incrementally on both sides as though there's a glass of water in the middle to some degree, that you don't want to ever get out of balance. So as you're going up that triangle, you never want to be so intimate with somebody and share too much with somebody that you don't have commitment with, somebody that you haven't grown a relationship with, somebody you don't have history with. And neither should you ever get to a place where you have known somebody for quite a while and are building that commitment up and have not yet, aren't sharing deeper and deeper and more vulnerable.
Correct.
And when I use the word vulnerable, I speak really passionately about those are two different parts of vulnerability. Some of us have a harder time sharing painful fear, ideas about my insecurities, my fears, like the doubts I'm holding, the anxiety I'm feeling, the kind of just the questions and those things. Some of us have a harder time on that. Others of us can go there rather easily, but the vulnerability that's harder is to show up and say, this is where I'm extraordinary. Like, you guys would have been so wowed by me today. Like, I totally went in there and rocked it, and we have a hard time, we don't want to come across bragging or boastful, and so we have to complain about our marriage even if we don't really feel bad about it. And so we have to learn vulnerability on both sides.
Yeah, I think that ultimately what we all fear is judgment. So I always like to end these interviews with this, your one advice to a chica who finds himself right now alone and without a good friend. What would you say?
I would say we owe it to ourselves. This is showing up in research to be, if you feel disconnected, it's as harmful to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow. And
it's twice as damaging to your body as being obese or not exercising.
Wow.
And yet we have been trained and taught and guilted and motivated in those areas. And when it comes to our friendships, we just really, we don't yet realize exactly how much this is necessary.
Yeah.
And for me, I think it's so necessary that I actually think friendships can save the world. I mean, I honestly think that we all owe it to ourselves to be in relationship with somebody else where we are practicing being accepted, cheering for ourselves, practicing being aware of when I'm jealous and still cheering for somebody, knowing how to serve even when I'm busy. And the more we practice that with people we've committed to loving, the more we'll be able to extend that to people we don't even yet know or who have different political beliefs or live on the other side of the world. Yeah. And so I'm a pretty big fan that says you owe it to yourself. This is a responsibility. You actually cannot keep growing as an individual without engaging in relationship. That's where we learn where our edges of compassion are, where we learn where our rough spots are, where we grow patience. Yeah. I mean, everything good about who we become happens in relationships. Yeah. So I would encourage women, if anybody is feeling that loneliness, to take responsibility and just say, what's the next step that I can do to start engaging in a more meaningful way? And it takes a long time. I mean, when people move to an area, it takes a good year and a half before you go. I mean, you can find friendly people, but what we crave are really friendships that matter. And you just have to say to yourself, it's like going to the gym once. Yeah. Not going to be in shape after one time, but I'm going to keep doing this enough times. A year and a half from now, I see results. And that's what you just have to give yourself that extra space, a little extra love, and just show up once or twice a week for more meaningful relationships.